There's a moment most people have had. Maybe you've had it too. It's late. The house is quiet. Everyone else is already asleep. And you're just sitting there, not doing anything important, not solving anything, not moving toward anything, just sitting. And out of nowhere, completely unbothered, this thought walks in. Calm, unhurried, like it's been there the whole time, just waiting for you to get quiet enough to finally hear it. How did it get this late? Not the hour on the clock, not the time of night. I mean your life, the whole thing. How did it get to this point without you fully noticing? And what's strange, what really gets me about that moment, is how quietly it arrives. There's no alarm, no warning, just this soft, steady awareness, sitting in the stillness. And you realize, maybe for the first time in a long time, that you didn't feel it happening. You didn't feel the years moving. You didn't feel the weeks stacking up. You were there, fully alive, breathing, doing things, going through your days, and still, somehow, something got away from you. Not all at once, not in one single moment you can point to, just gradually. The way light fades in the evening, you're not sure exactly when it got dark. It just did. That's what I want to sit with today. Not the motivational speech version of this. Not the time is precious, don't waste it version that gets said so often it barely lands anymore. I want to talk about what actually happens. What time does to real people, ordinary, intelligent, well-meaning people, who aren't watching it closely enough. Because I've seen it happen to people I love. I've watched it happen to people who had every advantage. And I've felt it in my own life, in stretches of time I spent in ways I honestly can't fully account for, and I'm not entirely at peace with yet. Most of us, and I mean most, not some, not a few, have built our relationship with time around a kind of comfortable fiction. The fiction that there's more of it than there is, that it's patient with us, that it'll be there when we're ready. We tell ourselves things we genuinely believe when we're saying them. Next week I'll get serious about this. When this busy season passes, I'll finally start. When the kids are older. When I get through this project. When things settle. When I feel more ready. And there's nothing cynical happening when we say those things. We mean them. In that moment, we fully intend them. But ask yourself something real. When was the last time things actually settled? When was the last time you arrived at that moment of calm you were waiting for? The moment where you finally had enough breathing room to start on the thing that mattered. Because for most people, that moment never comes. Not because life is cruel, but because life is just life. It keeps moving. It keeps generating new urgencies, new demands, new reasonable reasons to wait just a little longer. And while you're being patient with yourself, while you're giving yourself the grace of waiting for better conditions, those conditions are quietly becoming the past. And here's the thing about the past. Once it's there, it's finished. You can visit it in your memory. You can learn from it. But you cannot spend time there. The hours behind you are gone. And the question that actually matters, the only question that actually has any weight to it, is what you do with the hours still ahead. I want to talk about something that most people experience, but rarely name out loud. The feeling of being busy and empty at the same time. You know what I mean. The days where you were moving from the moment you woke up until the moment your head hit the pillow. Emails, calls, tasks, errands, obligations. You were going hard. You were tired by noon. And yet somehow, at the end of the day, sitting in that quiet again, there was this low, uncomfortable feeling. Not exhaustion exactly. Something different. This vague sense that the day went places you didn't fully choose. That you worked hard inside someone else's agenda. That you were productive, and still, somehow, not quite living the life you're supposed to be living. That feeling is one of the most disorienting things I know. Because you can't even be angry about it clearly. You weren't lazy. You weren't irresponsible. You did the things. You showed up. But something still feels off. Like you've been running a race and just realized you might be running in the wrong direction. There was a period in my own life, and I'm going to be honest about this because there's no point in being vague. There was a stretch of about 2 years where I was absolutely convinced I was building towards something. I had the vision. I had the ideas. I had the energy when I talked about it. If someone had asked me what I was working on, I would have told them with complete sincerity. I believed it. And in a sense, I was working. I was busy. I was thinking. I was planning. But when I actually sat down one afternoon and looked, really looked, at what I had produced, what had actually been made, what had actually moved forward, it was almost nothing in 2 years. And the painful realization wasn't that I was lazy. It was that I had spent 2 years mistaking the feeling of building for the act of building. I had confused thinking about a thing with doing the thing. And those two activities feel almost identical from the inside until you look at what they produce. One of them leaves you with something to show for your time. The other leaves you with a very detailed, very well-considered plan that still hasn't started. I don't say that to be hard on myself or hard on you. I say it because I think it's one of the most common ways people lose time without knowing they're losing it. We're not watching TV all day. We're not doing nothing. We're just doing the slightly more comfortable version of the thing instead of the uncomfortable, real version. We're drafting instead of sending. We're researching instead of starting. We're getting ready to get ready. And it feels like movement. It genuinely does. Think about a week in your own life right now. Not an exceptional week. Not your best week or your worst week. Just a normal, average, representative week. Monday through Sunday. Really try to see it. Not the way you'd describe it to someone who asked. The version of it that sounds reasonably functional and okay. The actual version. Where did the mornings go? What happened between 2 and 4 in the afternoon? What did Sunday look like compared to what you'd hoped it would look like on Friday? For a lot of people, that exercise is uncomfortable. Because when you look at it honestly, the week doesn't belong to you as much as you thought. There are pockets of it, sometimes large ones, where you're not entirely sure what happened. Where the time moved, but you can't point to what moved with it. And I think one of the reasons people avoid looking at it too closely is because looking at it means confronting something. It means sitting with the possibility that the weeks are passing and they're not adding up to the thing you said you wanted. That the life you're living and the life you're imagining for yourself are further apart than you'd like to admit. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to pile guilt on top of an already heavy thing. Guilt doesn't build anything. Guilt is just pain without direction. What I'm trying to do is point at something real, because if you can see it clearly, if you can really look at it without looking away, then you have the information you need to do something different. And that's the only reason any of this matters. Here's something I've thought about a lot. Time doesn't disappear all at once. It doesn't vanish in one dramatic moment, where you can point and say, there, that's where it went. It leaves in the margins, in the tiny spaces between decisions. The hour before bed that could have gone to the thing you care about, but went to the scroll instead. The morning where the alarm went off and you made the decision, and it was a decision, even if it didn't feel like one, to stay horizontal for another hour. The Sunday afternoon that could have been building, but went to something easier and softer and less demanding. None of those moments announce themselves as significant. Each one is small. Each one feels forgivable. And each one is forgivable, honestly, in isolation. But they don't stay isolated. They accumulate. And the accumulation is what shapes a life. Think about this very simply. 1 hour a day. That's all. Just 1 hour given consistently to the thing that actually matters to you. 1 hour a day is 30 hours in a month. It's over 360 hours in a year. Do you know what 360 hours is? That is nearly 3 full months of work days. 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 3 months. That's what 1 protected hour a day adds up to in a year. Now think about what someone could build in 3 months of focused, deliberate effort on something they actually care about. A skill, a project, a body of work, a business, a practice, anything. 3 months of real effort applied consistently to one thing produces something visible, something real, something that wasn't there before. And the person who spent those same hours, those exact same hours, in ways they can't quite account for, they're in the same place they were a year ago, wondering why nothing has changed, wondering why they still feel like they're behind, wondering why the people they admire seem to be moving, and they're standing still. Same 24 hours, same 7 days, completely different results. That's not inspiration. That's just arithmetic. Here's something else I want to name, because I think it's important and it doesn't get talked about enough. There's a difference between the life you say you want and the life your calendar actually describes. And those two things are supposed to be the same thing. You say your health matters to you. You say your creativity matters. You say your family is the most important thing. And you mean all of it. There's no dishonesty in it. But look at where your hours actually go. Not where you intended them to go. Not where they went in the version of the week you imagined on Sunday night. Where they actually, factually went. And what you'll often find, and this is the uncomfortable part, is that the things you say matter most are getting whatever time is left over. They're getting the scraps, the tired end of the day when your best thinking is already gone, the 15 minutes squeezed in between obligations, the Saturday morning that never quite materializes the way you planned. And the things that matter less? Those are getting the prime time, the fresh hours, the undivided attention. That's not a character flaw. It's not a sign that you're broken or hopeless or worse than other people. It's just a misalignment that's happened gradually, without you intending it, and it can be corrected. But it can only be corrected if you're willing to look at it directly and call it what it is. Your calendar doesn't lie. It never lies. Whatever is on your calendar, whatever actually gets scheduled, protected, prioritized, that's what you actually value with your behavior, regardless of what you value in your intentions. And if those two things are far apart, the gap between them is where your life is leaking. I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most underestimated forces in human life. Consistency. Not motivation, not talent, not inspiration, not the perfect plan. Consistency. The quiet, unsexy, unglamorous discipline of showing up to the same thing, day after day, even when it doesn't feel profound, even when the progress is invisible, even when you're tired and you can't quite remember why you started. People talk about motivation like it's the engine that drives everything. And motivation is real, it's useful, it has its place. But motivation is a feeling, and feelings change. Feelings respond to how much sleep you got, and how the last conversation went, and whether it's raining outside. You cannot build a life on a feeling that fluctuates. What you can build on is a decision. A decision made once, and then honored daily, not because it always feels right, but because you understand why it matters. The people who have built the things I most respect in the world, and I've thought about this carefully, they're almost never the people who felt the most motivated. They're the people who showed up the most consistently. Who did the thing on the days it felt easy, and on the days it felt impossible, and on the days it felt somewhere in between, which is most days. They built their life out of ordinary days used in a slightly different way than everyone else was using them. And here's what I've noticed about those people. They don't talk about it that much. They're not posting about their discipline. They're not announcing their 5 a.m. starts. They're just doing it, quietly, repeatedly, building something that most people will only see at the end, without understanding all the invisible, unspectacular effort that made it real. Now I want to say something to the people who feel like they've already lost too much, because I know that weight is real, and I know it lives in a lot of people, and I don't want to skip past it like it doesn't matter. You look back at the time that's gone. You add it up. The years you spent on things that didn't move you forward, the decade that passed while you were figuring out who you were, the opportunities that came when you weren't ready and left before you got there. And instead of that inventory making you want to move, it paralyzes you. The gap feels too large, the starting point feels too far behind, and somewhere in that paralysis, a thought takes root, that maybe it's too late, that maybe the window has passed, that maybe this particular life doesn't have enough road left for what you wanted to build on it. I want to be careful about how I respond to that, because I don't want to just dismiss the feeling. The feeling is real, the loss is real, time that's gone is genuinely gone, and there's a legitimate grief in that. But here's what's also true. The hours ahead of you are real, completely real. They haven't been used yet. They haven't been decided yet. And the question isn't whether your past was what you wish it had been. The question is what you're going to do with what's still open. Because the person who loses 10 years and then changes course is still going to be in a completely different place 5 years from now than the person who loses 10 years and then loses 5 more, waiting to feel ready. The math doesn't reset, but it doesn't stop adding either. And the adding is the only part that belongs to you now. The tragedy isn't the time that's already gone. The tragedy would be adding the time ahead to the loss column when you didn't have to. I think about what it actually looks like to start taking control of your time, and I want to be honest that it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look like a transformation scene from a movie. It looks small. It looks like a decision made the night before about what the first hour of the next morning is going to be for. It looks like a phone left in another room. It looks like a quiet hour before the house wakes up, used for the thing you keep saying you'll get to. It looks, from the outside, like almost nothing. But from the inside, it feels entirely different. Because that 1 hour, that one protected, deliberate hour, it does something beyond just the work that gets done in it. It tells you something about yourself. It proves something. That you can, that you will. That this particular day isn't just going to happen to you. You're going to happen to it. And that feeling, that quiet confidence that comes from honoring a commitment you made to yourself, is one of the most underrated things in a human life, because it compounds too. Just like the lost time compounds against you, the kept promises compound in your favor. 1 morning becomes 2, 2 becomes a week becomes the kind of person who does this, and the kind of person who does this builds things that the person who doesn't cannot. I want to talk for a moment about clarity, because I think it's the part that most people skip, and skipping it is why a lot of sincere effort still doesn't produce what people hope it will. You can be disciplined about the wrong things. You can be incredibly consistent and organized and structured, and still be working hard in a direction that isn't really where you want to go. Because without clarity, discipline is just energy, and energy without direction is just exhaustion. Clarity means knowing what you're actually building. Not vaguely. Not in the way you'd explain it to a stranger who asked. Knowing it specifically enough that you can look at any given hour and ask, does this move toward it or away from it? Does this choice serve what I said I was building, or does it just feel productive? Because there is a kind of false productivity that is very easy to confuse with the real thing. It's the kind where you're always doing something, always moving, always checking things off. But the things being checked off aren't the things that actually matter. They're the things that are easy to do, comfortable to do, low risk and low reward. And the real thing, the one that's actually important, the one that requires you to be uncomfortable and uncertain and possibly wrong, that one keeps getting moved to tomorrow. Clarity is what makes that distinction obvious. When you know exactly what you're building and why, the false productivity becomes visible. You can see it for what it is, and you can make the harder choice, the more honest choice, to put your real hours into the real thing, something else. And this is something I genuinely believe after a long time of watching how people change and how they fail to change. Willpower is real, but it's not reliable. It's a resource that depletes. It's strongest in the morning and weakest late at night. It's affected by hunger, sleep, stress, and 100 other variables you don't always control. Building your time management on willpower alone is like building a house on sand. It'll hold for a while, but eventually you'll have a bad week, or a hard month, or a season where life is throwing things at you that take everything you have, and the willpower won't be enough, and then everything you built on it collapses. What's more reliable is structure, environment. The physical arrangement of your life, such that the right choice is easier than the wrong one. If the phone is in the bedroom and the book is on the kitchen table, you'll probably reach for the book in the morning. If the phone is right next to your pillow, it's going to be very hard to not look at it first. These aren't moral failures. They're just humans responding to their environment the way humans do. The question is whether you're designing your environment on purpose or just living inside whatever default exists. The people who are most in control of their time are almost never the people with the most willpower. They're the people who've arranged their lives so that the important thing is also, at least in the morning, the path of least resistance. That's not a trick. That's not cheating. That's just understanding how you actually work and building something that works with your nature instead of against it. Think about the morning specifically, because I believe, And I've become more convinced of this over time, not less. That the morning is where everything starts. Not because of some mystical quality of early hours, because of what the morning represents. Before the day has made its demands. Before the messages come in. Before other people's priorities have had a chance to colonize your attention. The morning is the one part of the day that can still be entirely yours, if you claim it before something else does. Most people wake up and immediately give it away. Before they've had a full breath of the day, they've picked up the phone and stepped directly into someone else's world. A notification, a headline, a message that now requires a response. And what happens in that moment, in that very first moment of the day, sets a tone. Not always, not inevitably, but often. The mind that starts the day in reaction mode tends to stay in reaction mode. It gets better at responding and worse at initiating. It gets better at handling what comes at it and worse at generating what it actually wants to create. The person who gives the first hour of the morning to themselves, even just the first hour, starts from a completely different place. They've thought before they've reacted. They've created before they've consumed. They've put something real into the day before the day had a chance to take anything. That sounds small. It's actually enormous. Here's where I want to land, because I think the most honest thing I can say is the simplest thing. You already know what you need to do. I really believe that. Most people do. It's not hidden somewhere. It's not a secret waiting to be discovered. You know what the important thing is that you've been postponing. You know roughly what your mornings should look like for things to be different. You know what's been filling the hours that should have been going somewhere else. You know. The only question is whether that knowledge turns into something or whether it stays as knowledge. Whether it becomes a decision or remains a feeling. Whether tomorrow morning looks different from yesterday morning or whether it looks almost exactly the same. And that's entirely up to you. Not in a way that's meant to pressure you. In a way that's meant to remind you that you actually have the thing you need. You have the agency. The decision belongs to you completely, which means the outcome does too. Whatever happened yesterday, whatever the last year looked like, whatever time has already passed in ways you wish had been different, that's behind you now, and it's settled. But this moment is not settled. Tomorrow morning is not settled. The question of what this week adds up to, that's still open. And the most important thing I know about time, after all of it, is this. It's going to pass anyway. It has never once waited for someone to be ready. It has never slowed down because someone needed more of it. It moves at exactly the pace it has always moved at, regardless of what you do with it. The only choice, the only real, meaningful choice you ever have, is what it carries when it goes. Whether it carries the same day repeated again, or whether it carries something you actually chose, something you actually built. Something that, when you sit quiet in the late hours, and that voice comes back, the one that asks how it got this late, you can answer it differently than you did before. Not because everything is figured out, not because the work is finished, but because today, you showed up for it. And you'll show up for it again tomorrow. That's enough. That has always been enough. There's something else I want to add here, because I think if I stop before saying this, I've left the most important part out. We talk about time management like it's a skill, like it's something you learn in a course, or pick up from a book, and then you have it. And in some technical sense, sure, there are skills involved. But I've come to think that the real thing, the thing underneath all the techniques and systems and strategies, is not a skill at all. It's a relationship. It's the relationship you have with your own life and what you believe it's worth. Because here's what I've noticed. The people who are most careless with their time are almost never careless about everything. They care about their work. They care about their families. They care about doing a good job at the things other people are watching. But their own life, their own growth, their own becoming, that somehow ends up at the bottom of the priority list. And when you look closely at why, it usually comes down to one thing. They don't quite believe deep down that what they're trying to build is real enough to deserve the protection of their best hours. There's a voice in a lot of people, and maybe you know this voice, that says, why bother? Not in those words exactly. It's more subtle than that. It sounds like, I'm probably not good enough for this anyway. It sounds like, people like me don't end up doing something like that. It sounds like, I'll give it real attention when I can afford to fail, when I have more certainty that it's going to work out. And that voice is incredibly persuasive. Because it disguises itself as wisdom. It sounds like realism. It sounds like maturity and practicality. But it's not. It's fear wearing a sensible outfit. And what it produces, what it has produced in the lives of millions of people who listen to it, is a life lived below what it could have been. A life where the thing they actually cared about stayed in the back of their mind as a wish, instead of becoming something in the world. I don't think that voice ever completely goes away. I think some version of it lives in everyone who's ever tried to do something meaningful. The difference isn't that the people who succeed don't hear it. It's that they stopped letting it make the decisions. Let me talk about something practical for a minute, because I know that some of what I've been saying sounds like it lives in the realm of feeling and mindset, and I want to bring it down to earth. Down to the level of an actual Tuesday morning, an actual Thursday afternoon, because that's where lives are built or lost, not in the big revelatory moments, but in the ordinary, unremarkable moments that don't feel like they're deciding anything. Here's what taking your time back actually looks like in practice. It looks like sitting down the night before, not for an hour, just for 10 minutes, and deciding what tomorrow is actually for. Not writing a list of 50 things, not building an elaborate system, just answering one question. What is the most important thing I need to move forward tomorrow, and when am I going to do it? Not when I get to it, not if the morning allows it. When specifically, what hour, what it looks like, where it happens. That one question, answered the night before, changes the morning, because you wake up with somewhere to go, not vaguely toward productivity, toward a specific thing. And that specificity is the difference between a morning that builds something and a morning that just passes. It also looks like understanding your own energy. When are you sharpest? When does your thinking feel clear and your resistance feel low? Most people, if they're honest, have a window, maybe 2 or 3 hours, where they're genuinely at their best, where the ideas come easier, where the work goes deeper. And the question is, what happens in that window? Does the most important thing get it? Or does something less important claim it first? Inbox, social media, admin, the easy, comfortable tasks that feel like productivity but aren't really. Protecting your best hours for your most important work is one of the highest leverage decisions you can make. It's not glamorous. It doesn't require a special tool or a complicated method. It just requires deciding, once, clearly, that the hour when you're most capable belongs to the thing that matters most, and then honoring that decision, even on the days when the email is demanding and the notifications are piling up and something urgent is calling for your attention. Because urgency will always be calling for your attention. That's just the nature of it. Urgency is loud. It knocks on your door. It sends you messages. It creates pressure and deadline energy and the feeling that it can't wait. And importance, real, lasting, life-shaping importance, is almost always quiet. It doesn't knock. It just sits there, patiently, hoping that you'll choose it over the noise. Most people choose the noise, not because they want to, because the noise is immediate and importance requires a choice. And that choice, made consistently, is what a life is built on. I want to address something that I think gets in the way for a lot of people who are trying to be more intentional with their time. It's the comparison. The looking around at other people and trying to measure yourself against where they are, and how fast they're moving, and what they seem to have figured out. And I understand why it happens. We're wired for it in some way. We calibrate ourselves against the people around us. But comparison is almost never a fair measurement, because you're comparing your inside, everything you know about your doubts and your setbacks, and your real starting point, to someone else's outside. Their highlights, their finished product, their visible wins, and you have no idea what it cost them to get there. You have no idea what their 2 a.m. looked like, what they gave up, what they struggled with in private. You're comparing things that aren't the same size, and you're losing a game that's rigged from the start. The only comparison that matters is between who you were yesterday and who you're becoming. Are you better at the thing you care about than you were 6 months ago? Is the work deeper? Is the understanding wider? Is the practice more consistent? That's the measurement. That's the one that actually reflects how you're using your time. And if the answer is no, if you look at 6 months ago and see almost no change, then that's useful information, not damning. Useful. It tells you something specific about where the time went and what needs to shift. It gives you somewhere to look and something to adjust. An adjustment is always possible. As long as the hours are still in front of you, adjustment is possible. Here's something else. The version of yourself that uses time well, the version you're working toward, that person is not going to appear and then stay automatically. They need to be maintained. The same way a garden needs to be tended. The same way a friendship needs to be invested in. The intention needs to be renewed. Not once, not in one dramatic decision that fixes everything forever. Regularly, daily, sometimes. Because the drift is real. Life has a gravitational pull toward the comfortable and familiar and easy. And if you're not consciously moving against it, you'll find yourself back in the old patterns before you notice the slide happening. This is why the people who sustain meaningful change in how they use their time are almost always the people who've built some kind of check into their week. Not necessarily a formal review or a rigid system, just a moment, a Sunday evening, an end of the month, whatever works, where they actually look at where the time went, where they ask themselves honestly whether the week reflected what they said mattered, where they make the adjustments without judgment and start the next week with a cleaner intention. That small act of honest reflection is one of the most powerful things I know. Not because reflection by itself does anything, but because it creates a feedback loop. It closes the gap between intention and reality, and over time, repeated consistently, it does something remarkable. It makes you more honest with yourself in the moment. Because you know that at the end of the week you'll be looking at it, you start making slightly better decisions throughout the week. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just slightly. And slightly, multiplied by enough weeks, is everything. I've spent a lot of time in this conversation, talking about what time costs when it's lost. I want to spend some time on what it looks like when it's used well. Because I think sometimes people hear all of this and feel the weight of it. The should have done, the could have been, and the weight without the hope doesn't produce movement. It just produces more paralysis. So here's what I've seen. And these are real, observable things, not abstractions. When someone starts protecting their mornings and giving their first hour to something that matters, the work they care about, the practice they're building, the skill they're developing, something changes in them pretty quickly. Not the work itself, necessarily. The work is slow, as real work always is. But they change. They walk through the day differently. There's a steadiness, a kind of quiet confidence that doesn't depend on how the day goes because it was already built in the morning, before the day started. They made something today. They moved something forward. Whatever happens next, they already showed up. That's not a small thing. That feeling, earned daily, becomes the foundation of how you see yourself. And how you see yourself becomes, over time, what you're capable of. Not through magical thinking, through behavior repeated enough times that it changes the story you tell about who you are. The person who shows up for their own life every morning eventually becomes the person who knows they can be counted on by themselves. And that trust, the trust you develop in yourself through honoring your own commitments, is one of the most valuable things a human being can possess. Because it makes everything else possible. It makes the hard things feel navigable. It makes the long projects feel survivable. It makes the bad days feel like bad days, rather than confirmation that you were right to doubt yourself. All of that starts with time, with how you use the ordinary hours of your ordinary life. Not someday, now. You've heard all of this today, and some of it has probably landed, and some of it probably hasn't. That's fine. The things that land for people are usually the things they were already half knowing and needed to hear confirmed. The things that don't land yet maybe aren't ready to yet, or maybe they'll find you later when the moment is different. But if there's one thing I want you to carry out of this, one thought that stays with you past the feeling that comes from hearing something that resonates, it's this. The hours ahead of you are real. They belong to you. And they are, right now, at this very moment, completely open. What you build in them, or whether you build in them at all, is still being decided. And the deciding is yours. It has always been yours.